freue mich sehr, heute vor Ihnen stehen zu dürfen. Mein Name ist Susanne Rockweiler. Ich bin neu hier am Haus, ich bin stellvertretende Direktorin und freue mich, dass wir auch bei so einem politischen Thema so einen Zulauf haben. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, dear Eyal Weizman, it's a pleasure to have you all here. Als nationalsozialistischer Untergrund im Kürzel NSU bezeichnete sich eine rechtsextremistische terroristische Vereinigung in Deutschland. Innerhalb von 7 Jahren, von 2000 bis 2007, ermordeten Mitglieder des NSU 10 Menschen in verschiedenen deutschen Städten. Rostock, Hamburg, Dortmund, Kassel, Köln, Heilbronn, Nürnberg und München. Die Opfer waren 9 Männer türkischer und griechischer Abstammung, die in Deutschland lebten und arbeiteten und integriert waren, sowie eine Polizistin. Das erste Opfer, der Blumenhändler Enver Cimcek, wurde am 9. September 2000 in Nürnberg ermordet. Das letzte Opfer, die Polizistin Michelle Kiesewetter, am 25. April 2007 in Heilbronn. Bei 2 Sprengstoffattentaten wurden in Köln mehr als 20 Menschen zum Teil schwer verletzt. Am 4. November 2011 wurde die Gruppe aufgedeckt. Angehörige der Opfer, Betroffene der Anschläge und die Öffentlichkeit erfuhren erstmals von der Existenz des NSU. Bis zur Enttarnung des NSU wurde nicht in Richtung Rechtsextremismus recherchiert. Der Prozess am Oberlandesgericht in München gegen Beate Zschäpe, Ralf Wohlleben sowie 3 weitere mutmaßlich Beteiligte begann 2013. Das Urteil wurde 5 Jahre später, am 11. Juli 2018, gesprochen, doch die Aufklärung der Taten steht eigentlich noch aus. Und genau hier greift die Videoinstallation, die heute und die bis morgen hier noch zu sehen sein wird. Im Mittelpunkt steht der Mord in Kassel an Halit Yozgat. Er wird am 6. April 2006 in dem von seiner Familie betriebenen Internetcafé in Kassel ermordet. Er ist auch in Kassel geboren und mit 21 Jahren das jüngste Opfer des NSU. Zur Tatzeit befindet sich Andreas Temme, Mitarbeiter des hessischen Verfassungsschutzes, in diesem Internetcafé an einem der Computer. Er sagte später, er habe nichts von den Morden mitbekommen. Die Videoinstallation, 77 Quadratmeter, 9 Minuten 26, die der Schwerpunkt des heutigen Vortrags von Eyal Weizman sein wird, beschäftigt sich mit diesem NSU-Mord und versucht zu ermitteln, ob Andreas Temme entgegen seiner Aussagen nicht doch Zeuge des Verbrechens war. Dafür haben Forensic Architecture den Tatort minutiös rekonstruiert. Damien wird nachher mehr dazu sagen. Es gibt Fakten in einer Area des Post-Truth, sagt Eyal Weizman von Forensic Architecture. Und wenn die Polizei und der Staat nicht auf drängende Fragen antworten, ist es Zeit für uns, die Ermittlungen zu übernehmen mit dem Werkzeug der zeitgenössischen Kunst. Deshalb war die Videoinstallation, viele von Ihnen haben sie gesehen, der Londoner Forschungsgruppe, eines der vielbeachtesten Projekte der Documenta 14 und wurde für den diesjährigen Turner-Preis nominiert. Im Dezember fällt die Entscheidung, wir drücken die Daumen. Eyal Weizman stellt in seinem Vortrag die Arbeiten seines Teams vor. Es besteht aus 3 Einzelkünstlern und einem 16-köpfigen Kollektiv, darunter Architekten, Architektinnen, Filmemacherinnen, Filmemacher, Wissenschaftlerinnen, journalistischen und Anwälte. Sie haben die innovativen Visualisierungstechniken entwickelt, um politische Konflikte zu analysieren und auf sie zu reagieren. Die aufklärerische Stoßrichtung ihrer visuellen Arbeiten lässt sich mit der Arbeit von investigativem Journalismus vergleichen. Der heutige Abend findet im Rahmen des 10. Festivals Politik im Freien Theater statt. Ein enorm wichtiges Festival und Sie haben auch noch morgen früh die Möglichkeit, an einer Veranstaltung teilzunehmen. Sie findet auch in Kooperation mit der Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung statt. Ich danke sehr herzlich der Leiterin des Festivals, sie ist auch hier, Milena Muschak. Wo ist sie? Ganz da hinten, eigentlich müsste sie in der ersten Reihe sitzen. Schön, dass Sie da sind. sowie Thomas Krüger, dem Präsidenten der Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung, für die hervorragende Zusammenarbeit und auch meinen Kolleginnen Andrea Saul, die den Abend für sie organisiert hat, und Demian Lentini, die die Installation eingerichtet hat. Ebenso natürlich Eyal Weizman für sein Kommen und seinem Team, für ihr kritisches gesellschaftliches Engagement und dafür nicht locker zu lassen. Es ist, was wir in Zeiten der alternativen Fakten und Wahrheiten dringend brauchen zur Verteidigung unserer demokratischen Werte. Annette Rammelsberger, sie ist morgen auch noch zu hören, ich kann es Ihnen echt empfehlen. Viele von Ihnen kennen sie, Gerichtsredakteurin der Süddeutschen Zeitung, die den NSU-Prozess täglich mitverfolgte, schreibt: Die Reise an die Tatorte war eine Reise in ein Land von Schmerz und Tränen, von Gleichgültigkeit und klammheimlicher Freude über das, was geschehen ist. Als der NSU nach 10 Morden, 2 Sprengstoffattentaten und 15 Raubüberfällen aufflog, waren sich alle gewiss: So eine Terrorserie könne sich in Deutschland nicht wiederholen. Wer den NSU-Prozess verfolgt hat, der weiß, dafür gibt es keine Garantie. Ich gebe das Wort jetzt an meinen Kollegen Demian Lentini. Vielen Dank.
Herzlich willkommen hier im Haus der Kunst, auch von meiner Seite, zum Vortrag von Eyal Weizman. Mein Name ist Demian Lentini und ich darf Ihnen im Besonderen Eyal Weizman vorstellen und einige Worte zum Projekt Forensic Architecture und dem ausgestellten Werk 77 Quadratmeter, 9 Minuten, 26 Sekunden ergänzen, bevor ich das Wort an Professor Weizman übergebe. Aber zunächst ein paar Ankündigungen. Die Ausstellung Perspektive auf den NSU-Komplex und den Vortrag von Professor Weizman findet im Rahmen des 10. Festivals Politik im Freien Theater mit dem Motto Reich statt, in Kooperation der Münchner Kammerspiele, der Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung und dem Spielmotor e.V. Mein besonderer Dank gilt Milena Muschak, Julian Hahn und Konstantin Weidenbach für ihre enge Zusammenarbeit an diesem Projekt in dem Raum. Die Ausstellung läuft hier im Haus der Kunst noch bis morgen und ist kostenfrei. Morgen, wie Sie es schon gehört haben, morgen findet auch eine Lesung, das NSU-Protokoll des 6. Jahres, um 11 Uhr in den Münchner Kammerspielen statt, mit Schauspielern aus den Kammerspielen, dem Residenztheater und dem Volkstheater. Und jetzt ein paar Wörter zum Forensic Architecture und dem Werk. Der Verfassungsschützer Andreas Temmer war zur Tatzeit anwesend und geriet zunächst selbst als mutmaßlicher Täter in den Fokus der Ermittlungen. Als einziger Zeuge verließ er das Internetcafé nur wenige Sekunden nach dem Mord und meldet sich nicht bei der Polizei. Vor Gericht sagte er aus, er habe beim Verlassen des Lokals weder den verblutenden Halit Yozut hinter dem Tresen gesehen, noch die Blutstropfen darauf, als er bezahlt hat. Infolgedessen wurde er aus dem Landesamt für Verfassungsschutz Hessen entlassen. Das Ermittlungsverfahren gegen ihn wurde allerdings eingestellt, weil die ermittelnden Behörden nach einem Mann südländischen Typs suchten. 11 Jahre nach der Ermordung beschäftigt sich Künstlerinnen, Architektinnen, Filmemacherinnen, Kulissbauerinnen und Performerinnen noch einmal mit dem Fall und versuchten zu ermitteln, ob Andreas Temmer entgegen seiner Aussagen nicht doch Zeuge des Verbrechens war. Davor haben sie den Tatort anhand geleakter Akten und einem Polizeivideo minutiös im Berlin Haus der Kulturen der Welt rekonstruiert. Die daraus entstandenen Videoinstallation 77 Quadratmeter, 9 Minuten, 26 Sekunden auf der documenta 14 in Karlsruhe gezeigt, wo sie als eines der wichtigsten Projekte des Festivals gelobt wurde und Forensic Architecture unter der Leitung von Eyal Weizman für den diesjährigen Turner Prize nominiert. Eyal Weizman ist Architekt, Professor für Spatial and Visual Cultures und Director des Center for Research Architecture am Goldsmiths College, University of London. Seit 2011 leitet er das Projekt Forensic Architecture, mit dem er unter anderem 2016 auf der Architekturbiennale in Venedig und 2017 auf der documenta 14 in Karlsruhe vertreten war. 1970 in Haifa geboren, war Weizman 2007 einer der Mitbegründer der Architekturkollektivs DA, Decolonializing Architecture Art Residency, im palästinischen Beit Savoy. Weizman hatte eine Professur für Architektur an der Akademie der Bildenden Kunst in Wien inne, unterrichtete am The Bartlett, UCL in London, an der Städelschule in Frankfurt und am Berlage-Institut in Rotterdam. Darüber hinaus liegt Eyal Weizman seit vorgestern an 9. Stelle der Art Review Power 100 Liste. Herzlichen Glückwunsch. Professor Weizman stellt in seinem Vortrag die Arbeiten seiner interdisziplinären Teams vor. Die aufklärerische Stoßrichtung ihrer visuellen Arbeiten lässt sich mit der Arbeit von investigativen Journalismus vergleichen. Der Vortrag dauert ungefähr 75 Minuten, danach sind Fragen willkommen. And now I'll switch to English. Professor Weizman, it's a wonderful pleasure to welcome you here to Haus der Kunst, almost 1 year exactly after you gave a fantastic speech at the Lothringer Halle here in Munich, and also as part of what has been an incredible 10 days of performance, discussion, debate, music and art across the entire city. We very much look forward to hearing your insight into this fascinating project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm absolutely delighted to be here for the first time. And I guess I would like to start from a kind of an admission that there is something a bit counterintuitive for me recently, and something that has developed together with a forensic project of seeing myself. Let me start again. If 10 years ago somebody would say to me that it would be necessary for the political project that I'm part of, for what I believe in right now, to start a forensic agency, to speak about expertise, to speak about truth, to speak about normative frameworks, law, human rights, international humanitarian law, etc., I would probably reach for a 5-kilo hammer and kind of smash that image. So there is, I believe, something counterintuitive about that move, but I think it's also born of a certain topography of our present, and I will explain what I mean. I think that when we speak, however, whether you accept the term post-truth or kind of however you understand the accusation of fake news, I think we understand that the popular right these days is not simply arguing with us about facts, is not entering a debate of whether this is right and this or this fact is more right than the other, and coming out with any kind of proof or system for verification. I think we're experiencing a new kind of propaganda. So the propaganda of old was to say, let's say the kind of the Cold War propaganda, equality is better than freedom, say in very general terms, and therefore, whatever comes out of it, there are a kind of an alternative points of view that are projected. I think today what we're experiencing is a kind of propaganda that tries to take away our conception of reality at all. That is to say, to blur our conception of a common perception of the world that we live in, of what we see in it, that we are on Earth, that the Earth is getting warmer, that there are an unequal set of divisions within it, and there are human rights violation or genocide past and present within it, etc. I think that the attack on verification is much different than a kind of the projection of a different kind of set of facts. And therefore, I think both politically and also technologically, there is a necessity now to somehow reorient critical work to another aim. So verification is a kind of a truth practice which refers to the truth not in a capital T, it's not the veritas, but it is an act. Verification is the mashing together of various points of views of different institutions, individuals, people, witnesses on the ground, experts from afar, people that are in solidarity close and far, in combining, in weaving those points of view together into a common perception that is a kind of a meta-political condition on which we could articulate this on that political point of view. And that notion of truth, of verification, is now under threat. What do I mean by that? As when we are presenting our work, we'll speak about the NSU case, we'll speak about various other cases, the attack on verification, the principle of verification would mean to say to experts like us, you cannot enter the field in which truth is being produced or sought at all. Why? If, as an Israeli citizen, if I am articulating any position on Israel, they would say, well, you are articulated your political position in support of Palestinians, or you signed a BDS petition or anything like that, therefore you cannot speak. Sometimes presenting in art context is putting us in a counterintuitive position by which we are being accused of being artists rather than of being evidence producers. I say it's a kind of sometimes problematic, because when we are presenting in an art context, we have an exhibition now in London in an institution and at a Tate, and people come there and say, this is not art, this is evidence. When we're presenting in court, the people in court said, this is not evidence, this is art. Because you're an artist, you cannot enter into that process of verification. And I think, therefore, it is important for us to understand the way in which both technologically and also socially facts need to be reestablished. And what is the role of aesthetic practitioners and aesthetic practices such as architecture, such as art, and others in the creation of that common. I think that the process of verification produces a common that is analogous to the way we think about water of a lake or air as a common, that which belongs to everyone, and to understand that that common is now under threat, to understand that there are political processes that try to tear it apart or try to pollute in an analogous way to a lake that common that is our conception of reality. And I think that aesthetic practices can have that form of reorienting themselves towards articulating truth claim. And I will show and I will speak about what is the role of aesthetics, I think, within it, and how to understand the very notion of aesthetics. So initially, to describe what it is that we do, I would say we are not a forensic practice, we are counter-forensic practice. If we understand forensics to be the art of the state, that kind of biopolitical project that surveys, control, eavesdrop, catalog the people under the state control, counter-forensics could be simply understood as the inversion of that forensic gaze, looking civil society organizations and perhaps individuals looking at the crimes of state. But this is not as simple as simply the people raiding a police lab and starting to use it against state crimes, because the problem that counter-forensic faces today necessitate a different set of practices. What do I mean by that? the very first act that happens when a crime takes place, say here, somewhere in the city, is that a cordon would pop up. The cordon is a border that designates a space that only state agents could enter. Hence, you need to flash your FBI card or the Verfassungsschutz card, and then you could enter behind that area. It's an area that suspends the normal flow of life, suspends the law to a certain extent, and it operates only according to a set of ritualized research. A state agent would enter there. Sometimes people dressed up like KKK activists would enter in there in the white clothes and kind of collect some things from inside. They would take that material to the lab, a place that operates according to its own protocols and rituals, and that would go into the holiest of holy, the court, a place in which the performance of truth is highly regulated about who could speak what and when and how facts are verified. In counterforensics, none of that is actually taking place. Counterforensic activists, meaning investigating alleged state crime, face a paradoxical reality. A crime has taken place, perhaps by a state agent, the cordon pops up, and it is only the state that could enter and investigate itself. In order to even begin the work, something needs to leak out of the cordoned off area. Whether it is literally by leaks, and you would see in the NSU case that it was a leak of police files that opened up the investigation, or there are people on site and they switched on maybe the recording devices, the smartphones, and uploaded material online. In any case, we are limited by what could actually leak under that police cordon. Very often, the law itself is part of a mechanism of repression, as I will show you in the case in Israel right now. And simply, you cannot take the state to court in its own forums. And then forensics, the word forensics, meaning the art of the forum, forensics come from forum, need to establish alternative forums. And some of them are the spaces of culture and art that are able to allow us to make evidence public, that is, make it political. So you would see that the work of counterforensics is not simply operating according to the same parameters and the same assumption of forensic practices, but it's a completely different set of operation with its own limitation and its own kind of protocols of operation. I will start by showing you a number of projects and hopefully be able to demonstrate some of those principles within it. The first one is very simple. It's a case, perhaps the fastest case that forensic architecture has ever undertaken. It is called the long duration of a split second. It's also in display now at the Tate in London. And it is a story of a police raid in the Israeli desert on the 17th and 8th, in the night between the 17th and 18th of January 2017, a village, a Bedouin village that knows it is being unrecognized and it is about to be demolished by the Israeli police, is sending out a call for activists to stand with the people of the village in solidarity. On site, kind of sudden,
Okay.
and then another burst of gunshots is taking place. So somebody is shooting. Keren Manor, the activist, is feeling threatened. She switches off her camera and takes cover behind a boulder. For 14 seconds, she keeps her camera off. 14 seconds later, she understands the event is unfolding. The situation is completely changing, and she switches her camera back on. And what you would hear is a continuous car horn that effectively is on for the next couple of hours as she's filming and becomes like the soundtrack of the event.
Fuck off.
To understand where they are and where the person is, this is a kind of a post-production element that we've done. As we often do, we are locating those videos inside models in order to understand the movement of that activist during the evening and to see how far away she is from the casualties that movements of cars. Finally,
It's still dark. The police is very violent. There is shouting and shooting. It's all a total mess, and I don't understand exactly what is going on. I keep hearing this beeping of the car that is next to me, but I cannot see the car.
Effectively, she was less than 20 meters away from a vehicle, a kind of quasi-jeep, in which Yaqub Musa Abu Al-Kiyan, a teacher and a deputy head of a school, was bleeding to death within that car. So she is hearing, but she cannot see what is going on. In the morning, we wake up to this news: officer murdered in a Negev terror attack. The Israeli police is tweeting out the following story. The police forces came to demolish this village. This teacher entered into his car and drove with his lights off, the lights of the car off, and rammed into a policeman, killing indeed a policeman called Erez Levi, and then he had to be shot dead after that fact. Then other material start emerging from the scene. The head of the Communist Party, a Palestinian lawyer called Ayman Odeh from Haifa, the city where I grew up in, a man roughly my age, my generation, we grew up more or less together at the same environment, was there and was brutalized by the police during this event, but we don't know exactly what has taken place. Slightly later, this man is putting up a Facebook condolences post. Benjamin Netanyahu is confirming the state narrative that there was a terror attack, and says, importantly, that in retaliation for the terror attack, they will keep on destroying Bedouin villages and deny citizenship from those people. So that story now of this terror attack start becoming a very big political controversy. It's becoming a kind of a trigger for what was continuous and what was existing already, but an attempt by the Israeli government to further marginalize the Palestinian citizens, keep on demolishing what they call unrecognized Bedouin villages. These are Bedouin villages that exist in the desert for hundreds of years that the state simply does not give them property rights. The Minister of Police now accuses the head of the Communist Party, Ayman Odeh of having blood on his hands. We've seen he had blood on his head, but he claims that he incited this terror attack, i.e. trying to involve the Communist Party in this terror attack, and that is also part of a political move in Israel to take the legitimacy and finally remove the immunity of those members of parliament. And there's a continuous attack on Palestinian representation in the Israeli parliament. Finally, the head of the police says it's not only that it was a terror attack, it was Daesh terror attack or ISIS, and we entered the investigation at that point. What is happening around the time that we decide to enter is that police is releasing another tweet trying to claim to show evidence for what they claimed was a terror attack. So this is the terrorist vehicle. Here is the terrorist vehicle. Driving with his lights off. You saw it was the dead of night. Here is the terrorist vehicle, supposedly. Here is a group of policemen. As you see, they claim he's driving slowly, and then he's charging at the police and runs over the policeman.
יש דריסה של שוטר.
He's driving towards them. So, going
רבותיי, דריסה של שוטר, אני על הרכב הדורס.
At the police. So we decide that actual looking is something that it becomes very necessary. We have here two main sources for this investigation. One is a woman on the ground, Keren Manor, who has a camera, who doesn't see anything. She's very near, but she doesn't hear, but she hears. We have the soundtrack, and then we have a police helicopter with thermal imaging that sees through the night, this is thermal imaging, but cannot hear. So what happens if you put the soundtrack over this, the image, we start realizing that very clear, rather complicated. Data and find, we notice those shots that are articulated in a thermal imaging. The people would be rendered darker as they are because they're hotter. That car is not half black, half white. It just has the engine is hotter below. These are trees. And effectively, what we could start seeing are clouds, heat clouds coming out of the guns of the police person that exactly match the sound of, so we see the shots and we hear the shots and we can synchronize the sound and put it over. Verify it in various ways. I'll skip over this verification and show you here in bigger scale that you could see the clear direction that those clouds are taking towards the car. The car is far away from the policeman, and we have now 3 shots directed at the car, and only then we have the car charging down at the police. So here we have a very different story. Rather than, the police have to shoot the driver because he's run over a person, we have the police shooting before. Now, this is the 14 seconds gap, and now Keren Manor has the video back on. And because she has a consistent metadata on her Sony camera, we can locate that. And then somebody seemed to be at the door of the car. And when he's at the door of the car, we're going to hear now another shot. And I'm going to stop speaking. don't know exactly what happened. We just know that the order of the story as the police has told it is incorrect. We post it immediately on some quasi-anarchist blog, because we don't have time to do press release. We just want to put the material out there. This has been retweeted by the head of the Communist Party, Ayman Odeh, and the police responds to his tweet, like a last troll, saying, a manipulative edit will not change reality. The documentation of the killing proves the intention to murder policemen, the intention even. This is one named terror. No clips that distorts evidence will change that. The work that we've done, that kind of synchronization, is distortion. You would see throughout the work that what for us makes an evidence stronger, i.e. verification, information coming from various sources, sound, building into image, building into testimony, and other things make it stronger. The more edited a work would be, the more it's vulnerable to these kind of accusation, right? They're kind of fake newsing us, the Israeli police. Still, the Times of Israel, all of a sudden there's a leak. And what is being leaked is the pathological report on the body of Yaqub Musa Abu Kian, and we know that he's been hit in the right knee, the same leg that was there to push the gas pedal. Now, the entire idea, the entire theory of the terror attack means that the trigger, the weapon, is the car and the gas pedal, right? If his foot is on the gas pedal, he intended to commit terror attack even after he was shot. Imagine, let's say they accept our theory that police shot first, he could have later pressed the gas and accelerated towards the police. Still, the Minister of Police starts feeling the heat, and he goes on Parliament. He's been asked by different parties in the Parliament, and in the Parliament he's denying that, fake newsing us again, etc., and says, I will continue to tell the truth, despite there being members of the left, I suppose that's us, that won't like this. No one will silence me, share, good night, etc. Still, mainstream media, like the Jerusalem Post, is understanding Epis is not good about the police narrative and keeps on pushing our idea. The police, as a response, falls back to the strongest argument. The car was driving in the dead of night with its lights off. And so then we enter and we decide to take another look.
فأطلقت الشرطة النار عليه بزعم محاولته تنفيذ.
So many cars, so many lights moving around, but we think that even though Al Jazeera did not notice it and use this material simply as a backdrop, that this vehicle over there could be, and we did it on many cars and we found ourselves wrong, that this car could be the car that Yaqub Musa. And again, we have synchronize the Al Jazeera footage, mainstream footage now, with activist footage. On the left, Keren Manor. Now they're at the same time. And we're going to start trying to track. Here, we start seeing this light. We're suspecting that might.
Okay.
Now the Al Jazeera footage kicks in. We don't have anything. Maybe that's the same car. Both those cars, by the way, have the lights on. This is why it's important to try to verify. Now, how do you know in the dark where things are? What is your moment, your only kind of like orientation? What we see are two figures standing in front of the car over here, and then the car would move further, and we see another two, right? So we have 2 and 2. And we can now look at the helicopter video and see that there would be 2 people and 2 people in the right angle would be able to prove it. What we have in the model, we project the police helicopter footage onto the model, and we locate the people that we saw as heat sources. We now build them into the model, and we are looking to see that we can have a perfect match. Again, we do find that. We do have those 2 and 2, and we can claim very clearly, although it takes a lot of verification work, that the lights on the car were on. That is, we post it again on 972, Al Jazeera picks it up, and then the kind of more liberal Haaretz newspaper, and that now the police story completely collapses. Note that to, the kind of the synchronization, the showing that there was another verification shot, this entire composition could be attacked as manipulative, but something very simple like lights on, lights off has what kind of led to the story collapse. And then this is a caricature in the Israeli media. The head of the minister in charge of the police tell the head of the police, I got it, you will apologize and I will accept your apology. They're backtracking over that being a terror attack, and one of the ministers apologizing, though the government now backtracked on the backtracking. That should have been the moment where we backed off, but we decided to confront it. Again, we don't enter the court in here. Everything happens in a kind of chaotic forum of the public domain. And we know that we need a car. But of course, as I said, there's a cordon around the site. The car is in a lab somewhere. We don't have access to it. What we have is 6 images of the car, and we are able to construct a 3D model from them and start looking at what traces, what's in the car could tell us more about what is going on, and start identifying various features and bullet holes in it that we are going to locate now on site in relation to the locations of the policemen that are there. So this is what it takes, no? I mean, you don't have, when you work in counter-forensic, when you don't have access to this, you need to work with what you have. Now, here we decided to do something else. We decided to actually socialize, so to say, evidence production. We went to the village, we spoke to the villagers. This is Ayman Odeh, the head of the Communist Party. He also came, and we decided to do a complete reenactment with all the witnesses where they were, in order to understand more what was going on. We took a car, the same vehicle, the same type of vehicle. We placed actors at the places that they were, and we are trying to see at the first point whether if you just remove the foot from the gas or the brake pedal, what would happen? Would the car actually roll at the same speed that it would have rolled, that it's seen rolled on the helicopter video? And we repeat it several times. We actually synchronize it also with the activist. Okay. Testimony, evidence, reconstruction, sound and light. Very safe speed. Slowing the video there, i.e. there is no malintention in that thing. The car simply lost control. But we see something very important during the reenactment. When the it's a safety measure. And that means whoever approached the car from outside, so we saw that policeman, we heard the shot, and we know the door is opened because we see it also opened later in a model that we have made from the photographs, and there's no bullet hole through it. So who opened that door? And we think this is, although it's a kind of claim that needs further verification, and we are calling for the pathological report to open, or to be released to us, but we're suspecting what is being shown is that Yaqub Musa Abulkian in fact responded to the police request, opened the door, and then got shot as he did that. So this is a serious matter because within this incident, you could say there are many incidents in the context of the Israeli occupation, or indeed human rights violation. The issue is always to choose those cases that can open up much wider political context. You need to reconstruct the world in which a split second could have taken place. And this is really the necessity for it. So although the police narrative has collapsed, although right now nobody sane in Israel thinks that this was a terror attack, the police decided not to charge the policeman that shot and killed Yaqub Musa Abul Kian. And the logic that they have explained it with would be familiar to any American civil rights activist, or I don't know what is the equivalent here. It's the split-second logic. Split-second logic means within a split second, a policeman must act. Sometimes they must make a call, a life and death call. And the question is not whether they shot an innocent person or not. The question is, were they reasonable in thinking at that particular moment in time that this was a terror attack? This is the only question. It's not validated by the fact, but by the perception. The split second, the idea of the split second is like a pixel of time. Nobody says what's the duration of a split second. Nobody says it's a half a second, a third of a second, a tenth of a second. Split second is the indivisible unit of perceptual time. A unit of time in which no judgment call is possible. A unit of time in which only instinct reigns effectively. And then one need to ask, why is it the instinct of American white policemen to empty a magazine into a black driver reaching out for the ID in a glove compartment, or for an Israeli policeman in relation to a Palestinian driver or kids in the West Bank or something like that? In a certain sense, the logic of the split second connects the molecular level of time. Remember, the split second is an indivisible unit for law. In law, it's the indivisible unit of perceptual time to the long duration of colonial relation, of histories of segregation, or slavery, etc. It is there that you find it. It kind of cuts out the middle scale, and it is in the molecular level that you are able to reflect on much wider processes. And this is a diagram somehow of the work of forensic architecture, and to a certain extent the work on the NSU. And the reason we called it 77 square meter, 9.5 minutes, is because we thought that within those 77 square meter of the internet shop in Kassel, and I'm not going to speak about it much because the work is here and you could see. I'm going to speak about what it means, I think. You could see at play all the actors that compose what is known to be the NSU complex. There's a state agent there, a Verfassungsschutz agent, there is a member of a migrant community, Halit Yozgat, who has been shot to death, and the Nazi terrorist at the same space. And their relation, this cultural, political, you want to say geopolitical relation, is spatially and architecturally articulated within this duration of time and within 77 square meter. Here, to understand the context of that work, I feel like I've taken too much time, and I'm not going to speak about that right now, but I'm going to send you to the last part of my book on the violence at the threshold of detectability that just came out. You see there where we describe, where we enter into the long duration of conflict between Bedouins and the Israeli authorities along the threshold of the desert. But here again, the gallery space operates as a way of producing that work. The commissioning money that came with the state exhibition, this £25,000, was fully invested in, and was the only thing that enabled to produce this case. And now this material is going to go to the Supreme Court, and we're going to see what happens. I'm not holding my breath, actually. I want to take you through a set of other techniques of verification. So you saw that verification is a kind of a mode in which different kind of evidence are brought together Sometimes it is social, sometimes it is involving the testimony and reenactment of people on the ground, the people that actually experienced and endured violence, the images that people record, the sound in those images, material from the state, a leak pathological report, woven together to create a narrative that held right now. It held as a fact, but its implication, i.e. the state was not unwilling to charge the policeman on it. What do you do? How do you start a process of verification where you have no images? And the project that I want to show you right now is a project we've done for Amnesty International. Forensic Architecture was asked to research perhaps the most notorious prison run by the Assad regime, about 45 kilometers north of Damascus on a mountain. And it is where reports that torture and mass executions are taking place. But there are no images. Nobody has ever visited this. What we had, or what Amnesty had, are 5 detainees that managed to survive that prison and became refugees in Turkey. We traveled to Turkey. They wanted to describe to us their experience, but as very often is the case with witnesses that endure the most horrific experiences, the closer you get to the core of the testimony, the more memory blocks, repeats, distorts, and somehow you are left even without those faint traces of those recollections. Now, we knew that prison was built according to a kind of format that was, in fact, was designed by GDR architect. So we went here to the archives, we got the kind of like the basic framework of that prison, but we needed to reconstruct the details, and what we needed to do is to take 5 testimonies, take them separately, and mash them together towards a story that could hold, right? What do those testimonies agree upon, and what do they not? Well, how do you can weave those together? Another problem that we had in this particular prison is that not only there were no images, no recordings, or in fact anything except of the DDR master plan of that building, the witnesses that entered there did not even see the building. Because when they walked, they were taken in the cars that they were taken, they were blindfolded, they entered into the building, they were blindfolded, they had to press their hands against their eyes. What we had to do is to build a model in a way that is both architectural and acoustic. The process of building the spaces around the recollection, the logic of that was that memory can kind of unpredictably be woven together around the most mundane elements and around the most mundane question. You would not ask somebody about, the horrific experience that they had, but you would ask them about where was the window, how big were the tiles, and what was there. And what we added to this process is acoustic modeling and echo profiling that was done by an artist, associate of us, Lawrence Abu Hamdan, who is a member of Forensic Architecture. And so in fact, we were reconstructing it around the echoes and the understanding of the way sound traveled through this space. And finally,
based on these testimonies, we have constructed a model of the entire prison and located the witness testimonies and the sounds they recall within it. These testimonies are traumatic recollections and are rarely straightforward descriptions of events.
Listening to the testimonies, I want to show you the principle of the relationship between architecture and memory. If any one of you know about the ancient art of memory, that's a kind of a digital version of this mnemotechnic, this sort of classic mnemotechnic. Here,
الشراء اللي نفس الشيء اللي
we don't hear. Here, Hania Jamal, a Palestinian architect on our team, is interviewing one of the detainees. She simply wants to measure the door of the cell and to know where the hatch is in it. And she asked him about the dimension and this.
الشراء اللي نفس الشيء اللي سميناه طاقة، شيء تحت بيسموه شراءة.
بقى على قد ايه عرضها؟
عرضها بقدر.
So he said it's a bit longer than his face. So first of all, he connects his body to this architectural element, and we don't know what it is. Then he returns to describing the dimension.
هي عريضة، هي مستطيلة.
And then she asked him, why did you mention your face in relation to that?
قال لي مدرسك. أنا ما فهمت.
He himself had not had access to.
قال لي مدرسة. قلت له من وين؟ قال لي مدرسة من هون. أنا قلت لحالي اكذب، قلت له ما بيطلع، هو فعلا راسي بالطول ما بيطلع. قلت له ما بيطلع، قال بالعرض، بيعرف حاله إنه بالعرض بيطلع راسي. فعملت هيك، ففعليا أنا وقت عملت هيك راسي بالعرض مرق بالعرض يعني وقت صار العرض تبع راسي هو الطول الطبيعي. وبعد ما طلعته بالعرض رجع جلس لي بحيث صارت جوزة حلقي على زيق هي هذا الزيق تبع الشراء بيسموه.
And as his head was hanging outside the room while his body was inside, he was beaten unconscious within that and was unable to even bring his head back. It was swollen. What do you do with errors? So this is a kind of a big, methodological, perhaps theoretical questions. Sometimes we know that a witness is describing things in a non-correct way, at least in relation to the kind of Cartesian logic of the building. This detainee is being asked about torture outside his room. And this is what
بالعكس أنا هيك بتوقع إنه
كيف تتوقع؟
وقت كأننا عاقبونا يعني آخر شيء إنه أكلت كيف هيك بس لمحت إنه منطقة واسعة دائرية.
But we know from all four others, by now we understand the way the building operates.
بس الدرج اللي طلعناه يعني كتير أخذوك هيك وجابوك هيك، عرفت كيف؟ من كتر الضرب ما تعرف تميز أنت. أنا بتوقع دائري إنه هيك المحتى بتذكر لا لأنه ضربني كف بس فتحت عيني ما بإيدي.
And he's modeling that space as a kind of a circular.
اوكي هي دائريه هيك والزنات حواليها يعني.
انا بتخيل انه دائره بس انا المحتى دائره صاله دائريه.
So what exactly happens in the transformation of this space from a straight corridor into a circular space? Indeed, you could say this is a material you should discard because it doesn't fit with the art of verification. One testimony supports the other; it falls out of it. But sometimes the error contains more information than a correct Cartesian description because it contains both the corridor as it was and the psychological effect, perhaps that of total incarceration and trauma within it. Somehow the error manifests to the truth of the event in a situation like that more than the correct description, Cartesian description of that space. So let's go back to those deniers and fake truth friends that we have in the UK. Whenever you publish anything against Syria, you get a pro-Syrian left, whatever that means, kind of attack you. That was an Amnesty report. Amnesty is accused for working with us. Especially think about we exposing that error and talking about it in a very dignified way and in a way that I mentioned it to you, but we're accused of being special effect, fabricating the evidence. Again, very similar to the Israeli military, no?
The report that you have mentioned.
Hafiz al-Assad being pushed because the report got much wider than any previous report, factual report on Syria, because it was very visual and engaging. And Assad was being actually pushed to respond to it here on Swiss TV. And this
was a report made by Qatar and financed by Qatar. You don't know the source. You don't know the names of those victims. Nothing verified about that report. It was paid by Qatar directly in order to vilify and smear the Syrian government and the Syrian army.
There are a lot of eyewitnesses.
No one knows who are they. You don't have anything clear about that. It's not verified. So no.
So you see, he does enter into the logic of verification, right? One fact supposedly support another, but he actually takes the entire report out based on who paid for it, right? You'd see that that is a kind of an accusation that keeps on repeating. You know, we are always asked, who is paying for us? Well, we paid by the EU, we paid by different human rights groups, we paid by our clients. That immediately, oh, you're paid by the EU, you're da-da-da-da-da. So I mean, indeed, we in forensic architecture are still waiting for the Qatari money. We'd gladly accept it. I think that if Assad would know that an Israeli was involved in research, that his fuse would burn. So this is only the least of it. But just that you see that we are also working on American violation, I'll show you very briefly a prison in Cameroon, in northern Cameroon. There were rumors about torture and execution inside this prison. We could not get to detainees. In fact, we did manage to a certain extent. We had people going to another Cameroonian prison where people were taken from Salak, this is a military base and a kind of detention center, into another prison. This was so porous that we could send our researchers in there and actually speak with some of the detainees, but we could not film. And finally, we understood by asking those detainees very simple architectural questions. So Amnesty was researching that project for a couple of years before, and we were asking them, so what did you see out of the window? Very, very factual, dry question. And they said, well, I saw this tree, that. It's exactly where the Americans were jogging in the morning. And they go like, sorry, can you go back? What do you mean the Americans were jogging in the morning? And said, oh yeah, there were American soldiers there. And they go like, you're being interviewed on that for 2 years. Why didn't you tell Amnesty? Well, you know, it's important. So the fact that there was now suspected American presence within this space where torture and executions are taking place became very important, and we try to verify that. Sometimes the most unlikely of tools, those tools that spy on us can spy back. And Facebook, God bless Facebook, had we found all of a sudden American service personnel who forgot to switch off the location tagging and posted some chilling photograph here. I mean, what you see in this photograph is, in fact, an Israeli container, Tzim, that's the Israeli company. We could also see that it was, and finally realized it was supplied, the weapons were supplied by Israel. These are American soldiers. There is an arm here of a drone that we exposed that kind of munition in other contexts. And we build this model in order to locate perfectly and show that all those photographs would come only from one place. So to match them, it's a kind of like 3D geolocation, if you want to know technically. And we could see all of a sudden they have access right into the military base.
The unique distribution and shape of the trees assisted.
We could see that the military base was being built, that it's being expanded. And we see an American Special Forces guy training Cameroonian Special Forces in night vision equipment. And then we have this totally comic video of American and Cameroonian soldiers playing football with night vision equipment together, bumping and hitting the ball of this game against the room where people were being tortured. So here is a diagram showing you where the people we spoke to reported seeing American service personnel. This is where all the photographs are. This is where detainees were held, and the red one is where they were tortured, and this is where the football game has taken place. And that became very difficult. So the Americans were denying having presence there. It kind of became untenable for them to do it, and opened a big internal investigation and promised to be good now, and from now on they will not do that anymore. So another, just very it's important here in Germany to show our collaboration with a German NGO called Jungenrettet, I hope I pronounce it correctly, rescuing people in the Mediterranean under now not threat, but in fact the EU authorities trying to take them off the sea by claiming that they are people smugglers, and replacing them with with the Libyan Coast Guard. This boat is the Libyan Coast Guard that is tasked with bringing those people that need rescue in the Mediterranean back to Africa. So Europe is paying for that. There's horrible reports on human rights violation by the Libyan authorities, and the way, so Europe does two things. On the one hand, they take the NGOs out, and then they bring the Libyan Coast Guard in and fund it, etc. And this work is done together with an affiliate group to ours called Forensic Oceanography, Charles Heller and Lorenzo Pezzani.
Three.
What we need to do
at approximately the same time.
Sorry. Let me go another. So here is the accusation. This is a post by the Italian prosecutor saying, for those of you that don't read Italian, that this rubber boat dinghy, commanded here by the people from Jungenrettet, who are, they have the boat, the rescue boat Juventa there. They say that, so these are the German group, the rubber boat of the Juventa draws a small boat. This is a boat from which migrants in a separate incident were now successfully rescued towards the Libyan territorial water, i.e. the accusation is that they are helping people smugglers by bringing them back the boats. If it's correct, it might be, they might have a case, in fact, in doing that. But what in this image tells us that this boat is drawn towards the Libyan territorial water? How they can even put that claim on it? There is nothing in this image, in fact, that shows directionality. Well, there's one thing that does, and that's the direction of the waves. So you need to pay attention to them. And if you motion track them, very simply, you see that there is a clear pattern in the direction of the waves in it. And then, as you do, as I'm sure you also would do, you build a 3D model of those waves in the same kind of intensity and direction. And then what you do is you'd go to open sources and you would get the meteorological data of the waves during that day, the wind direction, and then when you do it, you locate the entire picture is the other way around. Here is the small boat of the Juventa, and they drag the migrant boat away from the Libyan territorial water. So you think this is, open and shut case. Obviously not, and the boat is still held, the Juventa boat is still held and not doing what it needs to do in rescuing people under accusation of being people smugglers. So the reality is a bit more complicated.
Site 1 is a rooftop balcony.
This is another kind of small project we've done for the New York Times. There's been debates about chemical strikes in Syria. Very briefly, Douma is a suburb of Damascus. There were 2 canisters that are compatible with chlorine canisters that were found, one in a roof, one in a bedroom. And the question was, very simply, did they arrive from the air? So the air is controlled exclusively by the Syrian Air Force and Russian Air Force, or did they arrive from the ground? So the Syrian and Russians were claiming that those were planted on the ground, and the people on the ground said, no, they dropped from the air. Very simple. And we were looking at images of Russian media that came to show that they were brought from the ground. So the first people that arrived on site after this area was occupied were Russian media. No one else was there. And but while they were describing supposedly that this came from the ground, they actually captured a whole lot of data that was important for us. It went counter to what they were saying. So here is, we were able to actually disentangle some of the tangled mesh on the ground and show that it is compatible with stabilizers, so that would support that thing being dropped from the air. And then we could see, and I just want to show you how work like that is done. You can see an element in the rubble. You don't know what it is. But if you look online, and this is called open source investigation, and with our collaborators Bellingcat, now very well known for exposing the Skripal murders, you could see that in one of the photographs of Syrian bombing, you see exactly the same element in the back of a helicopter that would have thrown it, and that again pushes in the direction that came out with this thing, and that the material came from the air. Then, as you do, we created a 3D model, a very precise 3D model of that canister, and started to look at it tactilely, almost like you read a braille, like as close as we could to like touching that object, looking at all traces that were left on it. First thing that you see is the charring that is obviously compatible with an explosive head on top of it that would have released the chlorine, kind of shoot the nozzle off and release the chlorine. We go again on Bellingcat's site and we see that this is compatible with other canisters that are found. And then we see this indentation on it, and that also supports, impact. And we see the place where this could have occurred. And then, very interestingly, I just want to show you the kind of level of details that one is engaging with. You saw that we noticed a certain pattern on it, a kind of a grid on the canister. And we were thinking perhaps that is the impact of the canister on a balustrade that was above the roof. And we needed to verify whether it is compatible with the size of the crumbled up balustrade that we could see on the ground. So we disentangle it, and again, together with the New York Times, measure it precisely and see that it matches, i.e. it carried out this balustrade from above. But again, it's just those details that you need to look at. Sometimes we could see that it has a woven pattern, that it's not simply a kind of an imprint from the factory, but this kind of woven, as a fence has this woven thing. But then we notice something that is a bit extraordinary about this image. We see drainage sign on this canister. Look very carefully here. You see those draining signs. And that started bothering us because, as far as we know, water drained downwards, not upwards. But we could see very clearly that the draining is pointing upwards. That means that the canister has been rotated from its original position. And that means that somebody has indeed tampered with the evidence. So, to a certain extent, I'll show you now another time when we can actually catch this kind of tampering with the evidence. There's another site. Let me go forward. There's another site in which a canister is found on a bed, and we are able to reconstruct the room where it happens and the hole in the ceiling where it's likely came in from, and the hole and the location of the canister on the bed just don't align. We are not really content with the evidence that we see. Somebody did move it from the ground to the bed, presumably to make it look worse than it is. So our independent here, a kind of analysis of that was, yes, indeed, this came from the air, And yes, indeed, somebody on the ground was touching and interfering with it before the photograph was out. We don't know who did it, but that is the kind of attention that is necessary to have, because we need to understand that that images are not simply representation of wars, they are now tools of war, they're part of the entire ecology of war. And here we are in a 77 square meter in Kassel on April 2006, where the two Uwes, the NSU terrorists, enter and shoot with a silencer, Halit Yozgat, sitting here manning the counter in this internet cafe. So far, very similar to each of the other pattern of killings that the NSU did, and this is the 9th of the 10 killings. And but there is something irregular about that case. So there is here, sitting here at the back, it was discovered later, was a Verfassungsschutz member called Andreas Temme, who was identified by the logins on his computer that he was there. After the crime has taken place, of course, the police asked for all witnesses. Andreas Temme disappeared, and when he left the town, when he was later held by the police, he claimed that he hasn't heard the gunshots, hasn't seen the body, and hasn't smelled the gunpowder, something very important. So 3 senses he's missing on this moment. So the court in Munich here and other people say, okay, in that case, that's fine. And civil society groups are getting a bit nervous about it. Also journalists here, people are getting nervous about that. What is here being potentially covered up? And the more pressure occurs, then this has been slapped in, an embargo on the file until 2134, 120 years ban on this file. So 5 generations of Germans would not know what the Verfassungsschutz, what is in his file that could explain why he was in the shop. Now, nobody knows why. I mean, even us right now, having undertaken the investigation, we don't have, and we do not, and even if we had an opinion about it, we would not say what it is. Whether he was set up by the terrorists, whether he supported or collaborated with them, we do not know. Or another option. The fact is that panic button, like to classify something on a maximum kind of level of secrecy, felt very bizarre. And then, out of the cordon, immediately something was leaked. The story of this leak is interesting in itself. Thousands and thousands of documents, of the police document of the Kassel police investigation were leaked. So we had to take some years off and learn German in order to read them. After which we decided to do what we do, build a 3D model based on those, reconstruct the crime scene. The crime scene no longer existed in the internet cafe. The internet cafe is no longer there. It is now a honey shop, or a shop to buy urban beehives if you'd like to cultivate bees on the roof. But those images allowed us to produce, again, a 3D model of the site. But just like in the case of Israel that I mentioned at the beginning, we realized that what we needed is a real scale, one-to-one model in order to undertake the reenactment, because the precision that is necessary here and the kind of claim that needs to be made, we were going against a very well-resourced and very serious organization. So we needed to do, so what do? You call your friends. We went to the HKW in Berlin, as the place I worked with for a long time, enabled the reconstruction of this shop in one-to-one. So this is the model. Some of it we actually stripped it to white. Some of it built very, very precisely, and some things abstracted. The abstraction of that was done together with acoustic and other engineers. So wherever there was a window, a main window, it was just a pane of glass that we put there, or acoustic sheets that we located in order to reconstruct the acoustic properties of this shop. This is where Tema was sitting. And of course, what is unique about this case, as I think you know, is it's a killing in an internet cafe. When you kill somebody in an internet cafe, you need to know that all your witnesses are online, and therefore the biggest problem of processing witness testimony, namely durational memory, is actually to a certain extent resolved. So people know sequences of what happened, but they don't quite remember how long each one of the things in a sequence operated. Was it 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 15 minutes? You get very confusing. But here, everybody is logged in, and we are able, as you would see in the work, to create a dynamic matrix of all the witnesses, when they log in, when they log out, and then mince their memories into that time-space matrix. Finally, because it's a question here of perception, it's a question of the threshold of perception. What is the lowest sound that could not be heard, the lowest smell that could not be smelled, and what is it reasonable that he has not seen it? We built that room as a kind of sensorium. And what we needed to do was to find somebody to shoot for us a similar kind of gun. And we go and we get that done in Arizona, where you can shoot, they say, anything.
This is the CZ, no suppressor?
And we get the gun shot both with and without silencers, and we play it in a space.
Measurement 1, high-level gunshot.
And
Start now.
Measure the sound in order to show,
measurement end.
Long story short, that finally it is, by World Health Organization numbers, this is loud enough to have awoken a sleeping person, right? So there were 2 shots. Say he was sleeping, he wasn't. Well, the first one would have awoken him, the second one he would have heard. There is no possibility for that not to have happened. This fluid dynamic simulation that you see here is the threshold of the density of the chemicals inside the cartridge of a gun to be perceived in smell. So it's the threshold of smell, and you see the way it is actually moving through space. We finally did not use that as evidence because we could not verify the exact temperature in a room and whether a window was open and closed, which would have changed the fluid dynamics there. But whatever we tested was so far over the threshold of what would have been smelled and identified by a trained marksman that we were content with this. Now, you all know the reenactment video that Tema has undertaken. I think it was mentioned in the introduction. At the request of the police, Andres Tema came and why is that not playing? And reenacted the way he was walking through the shop, and to prove that it is possible for him not to have seen what has happened. So he's walking through the shop, looking around, and what we did is that we motion tracked his eyes there, and we approximated the rest, and we built a kind of a model that tracks him. On the left you see his reenactment. On the right you see what's in his field of vision. And I want to just spend a moment on that. This reenactment, we don't believe this is what happened. But this is the testimony. Reenactment is a testimony of the body. And it is the testimony that is most favorable, we assume, the most favorable to his version of things. Now, and here's another difference between forensics and counter-forensics. The forensic process was there to say who killed Halit Yozgat. The counter-forensic process to say whether a state agent is there is lying about it or not. We were not involved in who killed Yozgat. That video for us is a video of a crime in a very similar way that a video of a shooting in the Israeli Negev or of any other of the horrible things that you've seen today from me are videos of crime. This is a crime of perjury happening here. This is not a representation, but the actual violation of the law happens here on camera. And what we had to undertake is a reenactment of the reenactment. And so this is, I just want you to see it in this context. Here is what he's seeing on the right. He's moving, he says he's looking for Halit Yozgat at the back of the shop. He's moving forward. Where is he? He cannot see, he's looking up. Then they did find a coin that he left on a table. He's taking it now from his wallet. And he shows how he would have put it on the table and what's in his field of vision at that moment. And so again, you know, those, we get a bit nerdy on that, but finally, you have to repeat, you know, what would be enough for perhaps an art installation, etc. You need to repeat again and again and again with various variations. Now we reenact it physically. That person, member of our team, is wearing a GoPro camera at the height of the eyes of Andreas Temme. He's reenacting the reenactment. Now we place the body, the most hidden, it's not exactly how the police reported, but we take the most precaution. So now we're going to see him going back, taking the coin from his wallet and going to put it on the table. And this is what is seen. So that it's a long story of the. It was called into court initially, then it was not accepted in court for technical reason. That was nothing to do with us. Was to do with the way the lawyers were processing the evidence that were giving to us with the invitation. All that is reported upon, and you can go online and see it. So actually, it ended up in Documenta, about 200 meters or several hundred meters from the location of the shop, in a very small, rather kind of modest presentation in Documenta, definitely not as well installed as it's beautifully installed here. But it started drawing a lot of attention, something that really surprised us. We weren't even invited. We kind of, somebody passed on to us. It was the Friends of Halit organization and Aisha Gulech that actually passed on. She was invited. She passed on to us that invitation. It was put there and started to draw a lot of attention, and also started to draw the attention of the people in Hessen. Hessen is the state where Kassel is, and their Untersuchungskommission was the last chance to open that Verfassungsschutz Hessen files, and Green Party members, SPD members, and the Linke members went there and demanded that evidence is taken from Documenta. Well, you didn't have to take it; it was a video, into the parliamentary inquiry, presented there as evidence in front of Andreas Temme. So Andreas Temme would be subpoenaed to actually watch that video. The CDU was kind of which was in charge of at the time of the murder, and still is, of the government of Hessen, objected to it. Again, look at that, very similar to the kind of, this is fake. CDU Hermann, Holger Bellino, it's got nothing to do with criminal technology. He's fake newsing us. Finally, it did not succeed, and Andreas Temme here was called in and was made to watch it. And it was presented there. A day later, the same Bellino from the CDU Hessen is presenting the argument. He said, he's talking about how it was impossible for him to stop it. He said, to submit a documenta piece to the NSU examination board did not make the investigation task possible. The art project is not adequate evidence. Actor and architects try to recreate the process, left populist. You know, he's kind of throwing whatever he has at it. But you see, again, you know, when we were presenting in Documenta, the headline was, this is evidence, it's not art. He's saying, this is art, it's not evidence. And I think that based on those things, we need to find another relation between evidence that is the product of truth practices, verification, and aesthetic practices. But aesthetics here understood as a question of perception. This is what aesthetics originally means in Greece, that which is perceived by our senses. That which is in the threshold of perception is exactly what was discussed here, that which could be smelled, be seen, be heard. Indeed, aesthetic practices are also about augmenting the perceptual capacity of matter and space and image, looking for clues in it, looking in the darks for those lights that could be read. The entire labor of production and synchronization and of assembly of evidence that is so tuned and need to be understood as the kind of hyper-aesthetization of matter, or hyperesthesia, that capacity to increase the perceptual dimension of it. We need to understand aesthetics also on these terms, and of course, when they do not allow us to bring this to court, to understand that aesthetic institutions, cultural institutions, art institutions are alternative forums for the performance of truth. That the truth here needs to be performed, it needs to be presented to the public, and part of the task, I think, of cultural and art institutions is doing this. This diagram, by the way, is not a diagram of a crime, it's not a diagram of an event, it's a diagram of the production and presentation of our evidence that is related to this particular case. Look, if you're a forensic specialist, you produce evidence and you present it in court, you would have one single line running across this diagram. This diagram has multiple layers, the top one being the court, this one being parliamentary inquiries, this one being activist, this one being cultural institution, this one being the media. When you are in counter-forensics, you need to dodge and move and let your evidence, if it gets stuck in one of the forums, you need to open another one, just like a little creek that, if you try to block the water, they would start moving in other ways. You need to conceptualize continuously the modes and places where evidence is produced. And indeed, sometimes doing exhibitions and putting this is at the ICA in London, is a way to do that. Thank you very much for listening.